Welcome to the Country Watch Political Intelligence Briefing Quick Hits, a weekly briefing of the hot stories across the world in brief. I'm Denise Youngblood Coleman, the Editor-in-Chief and Senior International Affairs Analyst at Country Watch. This week, the featured country is Sudan. On October 25th, Sudan time, several senior government officials in the African country of Sudan had been detained by military forces in an apparent military coup d'etat. The home of Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok in the capital of Khartoum has been surrounded by the military, and the head of the government has been placed under house arrest. Later, it was reported that Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok and his wife Muna Abdallah had been kidnapped from their Khartoum residence. They had been taken to the Republican Palace, where they were being held in captivity. The arrests of the government officials came after a period of escalating tensions between the Sudanese civilian government and the military leadership of the country. A month earlier, in September, a failed coup d'etat underlined the divisions between the conservative Islamists, who align with the military, and the nascent pro-democracy movements in Sudan that toppled authoritarian leader and alleged war criminal Omar al-Bashir from power in 2019. For his part, Bashir was wanted by the International Criminal Court to face charges of genocide pertaining to the war in Darfur. Now, fast forward to the present, Sudan's top military leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, soon declared a state of emergency during a televised national address and dissolved the Transitional Sovereign Council that had been established to move Sudan towards democracy following the overthrow of Bashir. Burhan also said that elections would be held in mid-2023. Meanwhile, as Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok was being held in the Republican Palace, the Prime Minister's office released a statement condemning the military and its actions, casting the scenario as, and I quote, a complete coup against the gains of the revolution and our people who sacrificed their blood in the search of freedom, peace, and justice. With the military coup now confirmed, it stood as a clear setback for the small but significant strides Sudan had made towards democracy in the aftermath of the ousting of al-Bashir. It would suggest also the failure of the United States Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, Jeffrey Feltman, to broker the differences between the military chiefs and the civilian leaders of Sudan. The coup in Sudan nevertheless sparked immediate international condemnation, demands that the Prime Minister be immediately released, and punitive measures as $700 million in U.S. aid to Sudan was withdrawn. Meanwhile, in an effort to resist the military takeover, the Sudanese Professionals Association reportedly urged people to take to the streets to register their discontent and resist the coup with all peaceful means. This call from the Sudanese professional associations appeared to be heeded, with reports from Khartoum indicating the demonstrators had established roadblocks and gathered in the streets to protest the detainment of government officials. Waving flags and chanting no to military rule, it was clear that the coup d'etat did not have overwhelming popular support. Nevertheless, the military showed little mercy, using live bullets to put down the demonstrations and killing at least several protesters while wounding 80 others. The October 2021 toppling of the Sudanese government by the military was now, in plain terms, a coup enshrined in bloodshed. It should be noted on the day after the coup, faced with an angry population and mass discontent, as well as calls for a strike, the actions of the military junta were unpopular. The strong international condemnation, in conjunction with the outcry on the streets, had placed General Burhan, the leader of the ill-timed and unpopular coup, in an awkward position, essentially reviled for betraying the trust of the Sudanese people, who were eager to see their nascent democracy in the post-Bashir era grow in a new direction. Perhaps in an effort to assuage international stakeholders and the Sudanese people, now outraged about the kidnapping and removal of Prime Minister Hamdok and his wife from their home, the coup leadership was in, let's call it, cleanup mode. General Burhan claimed that the deposed Prime Minister had been detained for his own safety. With that dubious explanation not being well received, the military junta soon released Hamdok and his wife from the Republican Palace. For his part, the Prime Minister remained defiant and indeed increasingly confident, given the reaction of the Sudanese people in support of him as well as in their reaction in defiance of the toppling of the government. That confidence was bolstered when General Burhan called for the United Nations envoy to facilitate negotiations in Khartoum between the junta and the Prime Minister himself. In the days since the toppling of the Sudanese civilian government, the political climate has shifted. The celebratory mood of the military has given way to quiet demoralization, with the realization that there was not enough popular backing for the coup. Meanwhile, the pro-democracy movement, supported by the Sudanese people, were refusing to acquiesce to military might. They remained in the streets in protest, engaging in mass strikes and organizing a so-called sit-in. The bottom line, the coup that had ensued only days prior was unraveling. Moving on to other parts of the world, United States President Joe Biden was vowing support for Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion. On October 21st, during a televised forum on CNN, President Joe Biden was asked if the United States would come to Taiwan's defense in the event of an attack or invasion by China. Biden issued an unambiguous response as follows: "Yes, we have a commitment to that." That response was a departure from long-standing United States policy of strategic ambiguity, by which Washington does not expressly state that it will defend Taipei militarily, while simultaneously assisting Taipei in strengthening its military defenses. At the heart of this policy of strategic ambiguity is the dual goal of deterring a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, while also curbing Taiwan from making an official declaration of independence from China's grasp. Not surprisingly, Taiwan welcomed Biden's forthright positioning regarding to possible threats to its self-rule. Presidential Office spokesperson Xavier Chang said the United States government has demonstrated through actual actions their rock-solid support for Taiwan. For its part, however, Beijing warned that Biden's comments risked damaging Sino-US relations and urged Washington to act and speak cautiously on the Taiwan issue. Given the potential fallout from Beijing's statement, Washington worked to prevent an escalation of tensions with Beijing. Specifically, the United States clarified its stance, but declaring that it remained informed by the 1979 Taiwan Relations Act, by which Congress required the United States to provide weaponry to enable Taiwan to maintain sufficient self-defense capabilities. The State Department emphasized that there was no change in policy. I want to note that Biden's remarks on Taiwan should not be easily dismissed as a faux pas or a gaffe. In August 2021, Biden made clear that the United States would defend its key allies and name-check Taiwan in that context. As a veteran statesman and a former member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Biden himself voted in 1979 to approve the Taiwan Relations Act. Thus, it was more likely that Biden's remarks in both cases were intentional and aimed at delivering a tacit message to Beijing, which has been taking a more aggressive posture as regards Taiwan. Now to Brazil, where Brazilian President Jair Bolsinaro has been accused of crimes against humanity for his pandemic mismanagement. A report from the Brazilian Senate recommended pursuing crimes against humanity for charlatanism and other charges against the president for his mishandling of the COVID-19 pandemic. At issue has been Bolsonaro's penchant for minimizing the threats and effects of COVID-19 and his tendency to recommend spurious treatments and other medical misinformation in regard to the lethal virus. Also at issue has been Bolsonaro's insistence on ignoring the recommendations and guidance from Brazil's medical and international infectious diseases community. This includes mocking and ignoring guidelines on the use of masks and the utility of social distancing, while suggesting that Brazilians use unproven medical treatments. To date, more than 600,000 Brazilians have died from the lethal coronavirus, the second highest death toll in the world after the United States. Staying in the Western Hemisphere, the Caribbean island nation of Barbados has elected its first president to replace Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom as the head of state. Barbados has been independent from the United Kingdom since 1966, but has to date retained the British Queen as the constitutional monarch and head of state. Sandra Mason, the serving Governor-General, was voted into power in a historic parliamentary vote as the country's first president. Mason was scheduled to be inaugurated as president on November 30th, 2021, Barbados' 55th anniversary of independence from the United Kingdom. Finally, we end with the United States, where President Joe Biden's domestic Build Back Better agenda and bipartisan infrastructure packages are on the line. To recap, there are two bills to be passed. There's the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure package that already passed the Senate with the support of every Democrat and 19 Republicans. That bill included $550 billion in new funding for roads, public transportation, rural broadband, and other infrastructure. There's also the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package to fund President Joe Biden's domestic agenda. Included in that Build Back Better package to be passed through budget reconciliation would be investments in childcare, paid family leave, free community college, and climate change mitigation. October 2021 was spent on intra-party deal-making as the president and 90% of the Democrats in the bicameral Congress grappled with intransigence from two Democratic senators, Manchin and Sinema. The price tag and programs ensconced within President Biden's Build Back Better agenda slated to be passed via reconciliation were renegotiated to satisfy the objections of both Manchin and Sinema. Now the cost of the Build Back Better agenda had come down from $3.5 trillion to $1.75 trillion. Left out would be paid family leave. Left in would be $400 billion for universal pre-K and subsidized healthcare, $200 billion for the child tax credit, $130 billion to extend the ACA and COVID subsidies, as well as for Medicaid, and $55 billion for clean energy. In the next week, I'll cover movement on this bipartisan as well as Build Back Better package agenda from the president. We'll also cover further revelations related to former President Trump's attempts to overturn the election of 2020, as well as progress on the January 6th Select Committee. Other items I'll be covering include developments on the Iranian nuclear deal, as well as negotiations going on in Glasgow as regards climate change. I'd also like to take this time to mention my comprehensive Afghanistan withdrawal report called Sunsets in the Graveyard of Empires, which will be available for purchase from the Country Watch website, www.countrywatch.com. Thank you for your time. Have a great day, and remember now more than ever, we live in an interconnected world.